I'd like to call the Tuesday, September 6, 2016 Papillion City Council meeting to order. Ms. Butler, would you please take the roll?
Florence. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Ingberg.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
That is correct.
And a current copy of the Opens Meetings Act is posted in the back of the council chambers. Mr. Hoynes, Administrator's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, begin my report this evening by expressing appreciation to 4 council members, Stubbe, Klug, Ingberg, and all on that side, that's right, Jaworski, for helping city staff go through in the CMR process to recommend a contractor to build our community center. We did make a recommendation. I think I informed you by email, but just wanted to point that out. Mr. Dave McCallum, I believe, a Ward 4 resident, provided some very valuable insight, and we'll bring that up on October 4th for council consideration once we're able to negotiate a contract with the selected vendor. Also, council member, somebody's phone going off? Also sent some information out to City Council. There's been multiple, in fact we had 5 more today, complaints on the parking of campers in residential areas. So that's becoming a rather intense topic throughout the community. So I wanted to just let all council members know the approach we're taking as city staff. The first thing we're in the process of doing is gathering the historical data. Some of us that have been around know that 20 plus years ago there was something termed the Blue Ribbon Committee that went around and actually set the ordinance for that type of parking in a residential area. There were some changes, although I don't believe it changed in the camper classification as I currently understand it in '08. But our goal as a staff is over the next day or so to put that information together. The department that's responsible for enforcing that, the building department's going to attend the meeting, provide information on the historical context in the current ordinance to the citizens that are, and it's a citizen hosted meeting, I believe, on the 8th over at the library. We're going to identify their concerns. We're going to see what the residents prefer as a solution, and then we will file a report back to the full council, all of you, telling you this is the history, this is the concern, and this is the request, so that we're able to keep all of you on the same page. I know that several of you have been contacted at various times and even invited to attend that meeting. So if you have any questions or prefer more information from us, but certainly by early next week should be able to get a report to all of the council on what's taking place there. Also, just notified on August 29th that the city of Papillion has attained the CAFR award for financial reporting again. This will be the 6th year. Did a little research on there. I don't know that. Where's that coming from?
Mayor's phone.
Oh, well, that's
ignore the guy in the corner.
Perfectly fine. We'll pause, Mayor, until you're done. So, there are multiple criteria, and I just wanted, first off, I'm sure that Nancy, I noticed when I was reading through the multiple entities that get the award, many of them had individual names on who the report was prepared by, and in our report, Nancy submitted it from the finance department and the finance division, and so to qualify for that, and the objective, it's they encourage state and local governments to go above and beyond what's generally required in GAAP or generally accepted accounting procedures. It has to show a spirit of transparency and full disclosure. It's subject to an outside peer review, and any single question mark disqualifies the city from consideration in that. In the most recent data on their website, I believe, which is for year ending 2014, there are only 9 government entities in the entire state of Nebraska that reach this level. And that's all government entities. And of those 9, 6 are cities. Omaha and Lincoln are 2 of them, and Papillion's in there. There's 1 county, the state, and the University of Nebraska are the 9 people that do that. And so that credit really solely belongs with Nancy and her folks in there. It's a lot of extra work, but I think, again, that interest of transparency and going above and beyond are things I really wanted to point out on how that award is given. Include my report, Mr. Mayor, by advising the council that this Sunday is September 11th. We all know that that's a very unique day in American history. Actually, Russ Zeeb has put together a recognition and a remembrance ceremony down at Hy-Vee at 7:30 a.m. Sunday morning, honoring all first responders, fire, police, dispatchers, EMS workers. It should be somewhere between 7:30 and 8:30. If you're not doing anything Sunday morning, you want to come down to Hy-Vee. I think that he's putting together a pretty good event, and I don't think formal invitations are going out. He's doing press releases and some other things, so I wanted to put that on your calendars and extend an invitation for you. Mayor Black will be doing a welcome at that event if you're not doing anything Sunday morning. That concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilman Jaworski.
Mayor, I would like to poll number 8.
Item C8 is pulled. Second by Councilman Klug. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote on everything except C8.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item C8. Resolution R16-0122, a resolution to approve a special designated liquor license for Northwoods Cheese House, 310 North Washington, on August 1st, 2016, with an alternate date, October 15th, 2016, from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. for the Oktoberfest event. And it is important the police chief has a recommendation that's part of the motion then that the outdoor music at the event ceases at 10 p.m. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Councilman Stubbe. Second by Councilman Gaines. Do we have proponents? And the applicant is here. Do we have any opponents? And if you'd state your name for the record.
Monica Anderson. And my concern is mainly that I live in the neighborhood just to the west of the stave and the cheese house. First of all is the safety of the neighborhood, parking, traffic afterwards. I'm sure that the liquor license is going to, of course, have some liquor involved in it, so there might be some issues that we have with the safety of the neighborhood, just the clientele that might be drinking afterwards and then coming into the area. Also with the music, the amplified music, once it becomes intrusive in the houses, in the homes, and that's where we have the issue. And I've spoken with several neighbors who have found it to be bothersome, especially with the bass that goes on there with the live bands.
Do we have any other opponents? Council discussion. Mr. Glover.
I would like to have the applicant come up. Just a couple questions. One, who is this Oktoberfest designed for? Is it a specific group, or is it?
No, we did one last year. It was the first one,
Okay.
and this will be the second. It's just for whoever wants to show up. Anybody from the city.
Okay, and then music-wise, are you?
Polka music
Polka.
till 10 o'clock.
Okay.
My wife put in one, but I already talked to Chief about it.
Okay. All right.
Is that it?
Mr. Mumgard.
Okay, and if I'm reading your diagram correctly, you're going to include the parking lot in your area?
Correct. Last year we fenced off the entire property. That was before we pushed the fence back.
Why
So
do
we
you-
had a temporary fence up on the entire property last year down into the cheese house. And
Okay, but since last year, you've included the backyard.
right.
So you have more licensed area than you did last year. I was just wondering, why do you have to go into the parking lot area?
Just for seating. We put tables out there, tables and chairs.
Okay, how many cars typically can park in your parking lot? Half a dozen?
I think there's 6 or 7 stalls put in there, yeah.
Well, obviously, I'm concerned about, your impact on your neighbors, and that includes the cars that now end up on their streets. how'd you come up with the 200 person expected attendees?
It's just a ballpark off of last year. We had probably close to over 100 all day long, 150. But it's an all-day event. It's not like it just goes from a certain time to a certain time. It starts in the morning and 11, 12 o'clock, and then it'll go until 10 o'clock, 11 at night.
Okay, I guess you understand the risk you're taking by having such a large event when your neighbors have been speaking to us all summer about the music and the noise.
Totally.
So I guess my point would be that you're obviously going to be watched. If you get that many people there, I wish you the best. I don't think your crowd ever gets rowdy, but certainly they impact the neighborhood greatly. Even with the music ending at 10 o'clock, people who live nearby will have your customers coming and going from their cars until late at night. So I would encourage you to do what you can to make sure that your party is not the party that gives us the biggest problem and makes us take steps that for next summer that will be really adverse to your business, because I don't want that to happen. So I encourage you to do what you can to make sure that the music is not overly loud, the crowd is well behaved.
We did one last year. Was there any call-ins last year for the one that we had?
I don't remember.
I don't think there was.
Yeah, it's pretty low-key. It's not like some of the bigger festivals.
It's polka.
And then the music that's at night is Chris Saab singing, so he's acoustic. Electric, you can hardly hear him, so he's from 7 to 10, and then the polka music's before that.
Yeah, well, your business has, in my view, has added a wonderful aspect to downtown Papillion, and I want it to keep going, and that outdoor area is very unique. So I encourage you again to have a low-key event so that we don't have to deal with any additional problems, because your neighbors do have a point. Your business certainly does impact them. So, thank you. Good luck.
Any other council comments or discussion? If not, please vote.
Eight yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next is, figure out where I'm at. Item, I think it's D1. Item E1, Ordinance 1747, an ordinance to amend Section 46-2H of Chapter 46 of the Papillion Municipal Code in order to eliminate the visual recording device requirements set forth therein, and to change the record retention period for audio recordings from 6 years to 1 year, to amend Section 4610A of the Papillion Municipal Code in order to change the commencement time from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. for regular meetings of the City Council, and to provide for an effective date. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Close the public hearing. Item F1, Ordinance 1745, an ordinance to adopt the budget statement to be termed the annual appropriation bill to appropriate sums for necessary expenses and liabilities and to provide for an effective date. This is the 2016-2017 fiscal budget. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 1745? Motion by Councilman Ingberg. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Any council discussions? Is there a motion, and this is typical of every year, is there a motion to approve the 1% increase to the LID, the Restricted Funds Authority? Motion by Councilman Ingberg. Second by Councilman Stube. This does require a supermajority. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Council discussion. Mr. Florence.
So actually, I wanted to spend a little time on this, on the whole budget. We have a couple of things here, and we have the lid. We have the property tax. We have not the carryover items, and then we have the special sales tax. And so I think that the budget's an important thing, and we spend a lot of time here on a lot of different topics, and we rarely spend a lot of time on the budget. And so I think it would be beneficial just for people to understand what each of these are before we just pass right through them. And so could we get a little layman's definition of what that is?
Mr. Hoynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Florence. Specific to approval of the 1% increase to the lid, over 15 years ago, the legislature found it within its purview and wisdom to place certain restrictions on local government on how much we can tax and how we can tax. Part of that was to put a lid requirement on the amount of property tax that we could collect. And part of that statutory structure, they said that an entity could, by a supermajority vote, exceed the the state-imposed lid by 1% or 1 cent, 1%, I think. 1% by a supermajority, and that is done to create capacity for future budgets. And so we have consistently and regularly over that 15-year period passed that 1% to create the capacity, because in the layman's terms, if you will, what that does is allows us to collect more dollars next year at the same rate. Does that make sense, or would you prefer a more detailed explanation?
And so, for instance, how are those monies used different from other revenues the city collects through property taxes? And
They're not. It's all property tax. It's just the amount that we can legally tax raises by 1% for upcoming years.
Okay, and so the approval, if I understand this right, so the approval this year of the 1% really has nothing to do with this year's budget, the one we're approving, but really is for the 2017 budget.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I had on that one. Do you want me to go down the list?
No,
or you want to do
I
each
can
in turn?
address. I could, because we had a discussion this morning, and so I'll try the best to kind of reiterate at least what we discussed this morning. So the approval of the property tax and the health insurance amendment, we probably could have done a better job of titling that.
Let's do a quick vote on this one, just so we
I'm
keep
sorry.
the discussions to the specific motion item, but that is the very next one, so we'll bring that back up. Any other council discussion on the 1%? Please vote.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item 2A, a motion to approve an amendment to maintain the current levy for the calculation of property taxes on the certified value, increasing the calculation for property tax by $11,891, and to use additional tax to support the health insurance rate increase for a total amount of $12,195. Is there a motion? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Any proponents? Any opponents? Council discussion? Go ahead. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Florence. So the issue here, we could have done a little better job of titling that, because in reality, our health care premiums far exceeded the $11,000. It's what we did there was just connected. There's a preliminary evaluation that the city receives in June of each year when we're building our budget, and then that is certified on August 20th. What happened between late June and August 20th was the certified valuation ticked up percentages, very small, that created $11,000 based on our rate. And when Ms. Hypes came to discuss that with me, I said, well, attribute that $11,000 to the health care increase. But
important to note that preliminary and the certified is by the county assessor, which we have no input in, so we're just using the best information when it's provided.
Yeah, it's a true up. And so while and again, in the interest of transparency, like most of America, healthcare is becoming a real issue for the city of Papillion. Over the 15 years I've been here, we've been able to mitigate our increased costs by simply going to the market and bidding it. And there may have been one or two other times where we had a double-digit increase, but this year our initial quote came in at, I think, 29.4%. It's really based on history. And so we hire a broker, and have for years, Silverstone. They went out and bid it in the market, and the two competing bids they got came in at, I think, 35 and 45% to switch carriers. We had a lengthy discussion about self-insurance, which I think is where we may want to consider in the future, but because of this history that we have, the professionals, Silverstone, Nancy and Chris in particular, it would have been cost prohibitive for us to go self-insurance this year. So our broker was able to negotiate it down, I think, from 29.4 to 28.4. Still not good. And the fair question that we discussed, Mr. Florence, this morning was, well, what about plan design and plan changes? We have commitments and union contracts for another year and a half that require a substantially equal coverage. Now, substantially equal may be in the eye of the beholder. I can assure you that at least the 85% of the employees represented by union contracts believe that means leave it where it's at. And we've had those discussions with them. So we were faced with where we may have had some latitude in the interest of good employee relations, us recommending we leave it the same this year so that we don't end up in potential litigation with 85% of our employees on defining what substantially equal may be. And in those discussions, even raising in particular the deductibles, we probably would incur as much or higher legal fees over the next 2 years defending that. And so it's our recommendation that we stay with this, and when we open the union contracts up within the next year or so, we certainly will have more history, hopefully be able to look at self-insurance and negotiate those at the table where the expectation is that's where that'll take place. So it's really kind of a high-level health insurance discussion.
That answer that questions?
Sort of. So I don't want to skirt over the county assessor setting the evaluation. Just touch on that a little bit specifically, what that process is.
So whenever you're talking property tax, there's two main components of it. One is what's the value of the property, which is what the county assessor sets and controls, and we have no insight into that. And it's supposed to be a reflection of the actual market value. If you go get a piece of property appraised, it should reflect that. I think the guideline is on residential, it should be about 95%, somewhere in there. On commercial, no, on ag, it's going to be, if I remember right, 72% or somewhere down there of the actual value. And so what the assessor does in Sarpy County, different counties do different methods. In Sarpy County, basically, the assessor attempts to look at every property in Sarpy County and say, what's the market value of that specific property? And then he sets that. His cycle is, as Mr. Hoynes mentioned, is in the June time frame, he comes out with the initial assessed value. We don't get it at the property level, we get it in aggregate of the city. And so we said we understand then generally what's the assessed value within the city. And so as we're going through the budget then, the second component, which we control then, is the levy. How much are we going to spend? And so what the need we have divided by the preliminary assessment then creates the levy. And we go through our actual needs, the setting of the budget in that June-July time frame. And then it's in that late September time frame when the assessor actually certifies it and said, here is the real value for the next year. And so then that's a little bit of a true-up that we're doing tonight as to the actual value. Any other discussion? Mr. Stubbe.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. First, just want to make a comment with regard to the overall budget process and thank the administration and department director specifically for putting together a budget that specifically leaves the property tax levy alone, which I appreciate as a tax-paying citizen here in Papillion. A couple things, though, is that I want to maybe have you address with regard to the fire department. I know that we made some changes a few years back, I think, which is an improvement from the standpoint of public safety when it comes to the fire department, and I know we lost some grant funding, so I'd like you to talk a little bit about that. I think one of the other things I just want to make a comment about is the fact that the growth of the community has definitely allowed us to essentially keep our property tax levy low because of the sales tax that's generated. And part of that goes to the development community. We do have a developer here in the audience tonight that's put in a nice development that has added to the sales tax that's generated, the property tax values that have increased within the Papillion area. So, Mayor, if you just talk a little bit about the impact to the fire department budget relative
both the fire department and then the development, and you specifically mentioned the grant funding. That is the SAFER grant, if people are familiar with that, and that's the program where at the federal level they provide some grants with the specific purpose of hiring new firefighters. We I took a fairly strong stance on the SAFER grant because it's come up before. The easy thing is let's take the grant, we'll hire some firemen. The danger in that, in my mind, is those grants wean off, and as they wean off, we have to absorb the full cost. And so the danger of that is if you don't understand the funding of that fireman long term, at the point that that grant weans off, you either have to take that money from somewhere else to keep that person on board, or you need to let him go. And so I've been pretty upfront with the union. We're not going to hire somebody not knowing how we're going to pay for them down the road. We don't want to get into that situation. So back to the merger with Papillion and La Vista, how that plays in is when we were trying to determine what is the appropriate number of firemen, both to be safe and meet standards, there was a contention in there. To meet standards, you wanted to be at a certain level, but to be where we are and be safe, it was a different level. And we took SAFER grant off the table. At that point, in determining the number, we said, what can our budget support without the grant? Because that number we know we can sustain and continue to pay for long term. And that determined a lot of the number we had. And so the decision when you voted on should we merge or not, the financial package that was presented to you was, the way it was presented was without the SAFER grant. We need to hire X number of firemen. If we can get them on board and pay for them without the SAFER grant, did it make financial sense? And it did, and we voted for that. But with that being said, we still applied for the grant, and we did win the grant. And so the last 2 years, the budget has actually been suppressed a little bit because we have the grant. This is the year we wean off of that grant and we absorb the full cost, but we anticipated full cost 2 years ago, if that answers that. And then on the development question, you're right, and we have one of the developers here, Russ, who has Midlands Place, has been a good example of that. The development has been providing a lot of sales tax, and that's one of the reasons we've been able to keep the property tax flat, is because our sales tax has been increasing. The other reason we've been able, I think, to keep the levy flat and low is in Papillion, unlike a lot of other jurisdictions, our developers take a little bit of an additional burden in development. You can do some development in other parts of the metro area, and the adjacent roads may not be expanded. There's examples all throughout the metro where you may drive next to a development and it's still a rural road and all the development's occurred. You're not going to expand that road. There's some north-south corridors out west that are that way. In Papillion, we've taken a basically philosophical stance that development funds impact of development. And so when a development goes in and they use an SID, they need to fund a third of that road that's immediately adjacent. Well, one of the things that's doing is it's keeping our infrastructure up as we grow. So the budget dollars for infrastructure can focus in the city. I think other parts of the metro where they don't do that, you fast forward 5, 6, 7 years, there's a lot of road improvements in the expanded areas that need to be caught up, and that'll have a big impact on property tax, and we're not going to have that problem, and a lot of that's due to the developers. Did that answer that? Okay. Any other council discussion? Please vote. Item 2A.
Eight yeas, 0 nays.
Item 3A, a motion to approve an amendment proposed by staff as outlined in the staff report. This is on the carryover items. Is there a motion? Motion by Councilman Ingberg, second by Councilwoman Klug. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion on the carryovers? Please vote.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
And item 4A, specific to Papio Bay, motion to amend the budget to use $250,000 of the additional half-cent sales tax at Papio Bay for improvements to address water quality and clarity. And this is approval of the capital project special sales tax funds, and it's specifically related to Papio Bay again. Is there a motion? Motion by Councilman Klug, second by Councilman Jaworski. Any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion? Mr. Florence.
So on this particular topic, by the way, I'm in favor of this, but this is an opportunity to just talk about the half-cent sales tax. And, you know, Papio Bay is an example where we had an unexpected expense. The city handled it beautifully, by the way. You couldn't have asked for any better response to it. But as we look at building the community center and how we spend these dollars, my concern is always the infrastructure. What do we have? What have we got built? And our obligation, responsibility to take care of that. And when we look at the community center and what it could be, I'm always a little hesitant in saying, hey, you know what, we don't want to spend all of the money on a project like that because we can't predict what other infrastructure costs we might have come up that we need to invest in. And I think it's important for a city, especially a special place like Papillion, to be able to invest in what we already have. So I don't know that I have a comment so much as a chance to share.
Appreciate that. Any other council discussion? Please vote.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
Now, those were all amendments, so now vote on the original motion to Ordinance 1745 as amended.
Eight yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item F2, Resolution R16-0112, a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve setting the 2016-2017 property tax request. This is a public hearing, and I'll open it. Is there any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R16-0112? Motion by Councilman Ingberg, second by Councilman Gaines. Any council discussion? Please vote.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Item F3, Resolution R16-0083-1, a resolution to approve right-of-way and easement acquisitions for Schramm Road from 111th Street to Turkey Road, and this is specific to Track 3. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R16-0083-1? Motion by Councilman Stubbe. Second by Councilman Glover. Any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Item F4, Resolution R16-0111, a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve a special use permit to allow storage, limited access, as a permitted use on the property legally described as Lot 2, Prairie Corners Replat 4, generally located at 14403 Frontier Road. The applicant is Redbird Group LLC, Heartland Storage, and this is a public hearing. I'll open it. Do we have proponents?
Members of the council, my name is Russ Daub. I'm representing Darrell Licey here today with Redbird. I'll make this fairly short. This is the third type of storage project that I've worked on with Darrell. His primary goal in each of them has been to adopt modern thinking and modern design for something that can be less attractive or unliked by some. The key here is that we'll give Mr. Stursma a good design challenge before this is over, because we accept the conditions that have been required for the application. We know it's in a highway overlay district, and we know that it is subject to high design standards. So he has 3 of these up to now. He just got approval to put one in Sarpy County at 144th and Harrison. And it is a ground level unit with no high-rise self-storage in it. This is a high-rise, totally integrated self-storage facility. Would eventually have like 500 small pods in it for rent. Everything is inside. There's no outside storage. It's all climate controlled. We all may like to have offices in this place before it's over, but the issue is it's got to be well done. This is on the southeast corner of the Sapp Brothers Exchange intersection out at 100 on I-680. The elevations that are in your application are E&A type applications. They're not architectural renderings, but we know that if we get approval, the style that he uses is to complete design. In this case, it will require remediation, good specifications and removal of existing tanks for a filling station that's there now. And then in the ultimate instance, do all the feasibility analysis as that moves forward. But we've also learned if you don't have the initial authority to get in the door, you could do a lot of that stuff and be disappointed. But just the simple facts are the environment of it around us. We know we have a large trucking headquarters there that is a well-designed building. The rest of the community around it is clearly highway, interstate, industrial in nature. But just a simple picture, if it shows, hope it does. In many of the municipalities, this is the kind of product you come up with. The one that he is building in Omaha now, I think, will be the single best looking interior storage facility in the city. It picks up aluminum features, it picks up attractive colors, it's not gaudy, it darn near looks like an office. So with that being said, again, the conditions that are required for approval would be acceptable, and I would defer to questions or to address comments that might come up by opponents.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R-16-0111? Motion by Councilman Ingberg. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Is there any council discussion? Please vote.
Eight yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item F5, Resolution R-16-0116, a resolution to approve an amendment to the Arterial Street Improvement Program, ASIP priority projects. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R-16-0116? Motion by Councilman Stubbe. Second by Councilman Gaines. Do we have any proponents? Opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Eight yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Item F6, Resolution R-16-0117, a resolution to approve the Pink Industrial 2 subdivision agreement. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R-16-0117? Motion by Councilman Stubbe, second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have any proponents? And the applicant is here. If you'd state your name for the record.
My name is Richard Anderson with Croker Huck Law Firm, 2120 South 72nd Street. We're here to represent the applicant, the developer who has worked with the city. We appreciate the city's effort in putting this together. There's one oddity of this agreement, and that is that there is a condition preceding to that. We've been working toward a resolution of this situation that developed out of the annexation process that went through about a year ago. As you know, we appeared at that time. We wanted to make sure it didn't interrupt the development. And it would have flown differently had there not been litigation. There's been litigation, and of course things have been interrupted. We have attempted various methods for developing this property through sales to other parties who would come in and develop it all in one piece. Those didn't work out. So the developer is now ready to come in. We talked about annexing this into the SID. The city, in our conversations with them, said, gee, we'd rather you didn't, so we haven't done that. We are here now saying that we need to move forward with the development. The developer is ready to take on the development of the public improvements as a developer cost. Many of the improvements would have been the developers as special assessments. Many would not. The developer has nevertheless come forward and said, we'll do that. But we need to move forward this year. The plans and specifications for this have been submitted to the city. We haven't yet heard approval or the agreement to allow this developer to move forward. And that's always been the underlying condition to moving forward with this agreement. So where we stand today is that we in the development of this agreement, although it's not exactly as we had proposed it, but we have said if we can move forward, a condition with the 3 improvements that are necessary at this time, which are storm sewer, sanitary sewer, and streets, all of which plans have been prepared by Thompson, Dreesen, and Dorter, submitted to the city. And we're just waiting for those to be allowed to move forward. We understand we need other approvals from the outside, third parties that take time, but those 3 things need to start moving now. If we can do that, we said we would sign this agreement.
Thank you.
We're asking you to sign to authorize the agreement, not necessarily sign it, but authorize it contingent upon us signing when we are assured we can get that approval in a timely manner. I should also point out there is an addition later on in this negotiation that the existing agreement, there is an existing subdivision agreement in place, that existing agreement be terminated. That termination requires the sanitary improvement district to act. That meeting hasn't occurred. There is a meeting coming up, but that meeting has not occurred, so we don't have all the parties in agreement yet. We don't expect the SID, if everything else falls into place, to be a problem. So we're asking that you approve what your planning department has done, understanding there's a precondition on our part that isn't written into the agreement, wasn't allowed to be put in, and that's the only condition. If it doesn't, we don't sign, you don't sign, nobody signs, and we're in the same place. If it does happen, we all move forward. We think this is a win-win for people. You get development immediately next door without debt. And presumably the land levels will go up. Presumably we expect quick development of the property. It seems to me it's a great deal for everybody if we can accomplish that.
Appreciate it. Any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
Eight yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next is committee reports, and I don't think any have met in the last 2 weeks. Do we have any comments from the floor? So we got a student, at least one student here. You got to come up and introduce yourself and what you're here for.
My name's Grayson, and I'm here to just to observe the meeting for my AP Government class.
Mr. Keller?
Yep.
School has started. Thanks for coming out. Any other comments from the floor? We do have a closed session tonight. Do we have any council comments? We got another student? You got to come up too. Hey, you're not going to get out of it.
Hi.
What's your name?
Stephen Wilson.
Also Mr. Keller's class?
Mr. Wagnish's class.
Okay.
Same school.
Very good.
Same
Thanks.
class.
All right. Thank you. Any council comments? Mr. Florence.
So I do want to take a minute after asking those budget questions to compliment the staff. I will tell you that that the staff does a wonderful job, certainly transparent in answering every question and all questions and taking the time to explain. So I think that's a credit, and don't want to leave that unsaid. So thank you for a really good effort on that budget.
Well, and with that, I think we follow a different process than probably most municipalities, and a lot of the burden goes to the department heads. They put in a tremendous amount of work to make it happen, so just want to publicly thank them as well. A couple of things from the last couple of weeks. Mr. Sturzman was the race director again for the Twilight Criterium. Was that year 10? 10th anniversary. Went really well. It's important to note there were more than one. I think the gentleman from Texas, people came up specifically for this race. And I think it was the guy from Texas didn't even run the race, if I remember right. Or somebody, maybe that was the one from Iowa. They came just to observe it to see if they wanted to come the next year and do it. And they were going to bring a group of people. So it's got a tourism impact. It's not just a fun race. And I think we talk about that with a lot of our races. Economic development and tourism and marketing and raising awareness. So that was a good event, Mark. So thanks for doing that. PinFed, Midlands Development was mentioned a couple of times. PinFed had their grand opening up at Midlands Place. They had a really good showing there. They brought in a number of their executives from Washington, D.C., and if people aren't aware, they've been a major employer in Papillion for a number of years, and nobody has known it. The ADT call center that was built in the Business Technology Park when ADT went out, it was PinFed that moved in, and they've just quietly been there. Nobody's known who they were because they didn't put signs on their building until just recently. But they employ about 500 people in the Omaha metro area, and the location at 84th and 370 is their first retail branch in the entire metro area. So that was nice that they selected us, and I think they're going to be good partners. School Foundation had their annual gala, and they actually recognized both the Papillion City and the City of La Vista as being great partners, and we got an award for that, so thank you for everything in that relationship. Mr. Hoynes and myself and Trent met with Ron Petak and Kelsey to talk. They're just doing a feature story, kind of the last 10, kind of a three-phase story. Historical Papillion, then 10 years ago Papillion, and then the next 10 years Papillion. So it'd be interesting to see. When's that come out, Kelsey? October 12th. That'll be nice to see that series. I think it'll be good context on all the development that's been happening, all the way from Papillion being a small town to a community of 70,000 in the future. Mr. Hoynes, Ms. Myers, Ms. Hipsey, and myself met with Andrew Rainbolt from Sarpy County Economic Development to talk about some items there. Keep that relationship positive and going. And then I went out today and talked to about 70 first graders at Prairie Queen Elementary about what government and cities are, so that's an interesting experience. Sympathies to Tom James. His mother passed away, if you were not aware of that. Reminder of the 9/11 events, both the one in the morning that Dan mentioned at Hy-Vee, and then there's one in the evening at Sumter. And then also last week, another ribbon cutting at Midlands Place. That's two of them out there. The Midwest Urgent Care opened up and is now open. So it's kind of becoming a medical hub out there, so appreciate that development. We do have a closed session tonight. Is there a motion to go into closed session to protect the public interest to discuss land negotiations pertaining to parks and litigation regarding annexation? Motion by Councilman Klug, is second by Councilman Gaines. Do we have proponents? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote. Mr. Mumgarden.
8 yeas, 0 nays.
I will restate for the record, the purpose of the closed session is only to discuss land negotiations pertaining to parks and litigation regarding annexation. Closed session will include the mayor, the city council, city administrator, assistant city administrator, city attorney, city clerk, planning director, and staff attorney.